Rural Americans deserve access to the best our nation has to offer, especially when it comes to health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families' health. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
LifeLock, how can I help?
The IRS said I filed my return,
but I haven't.
1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has paid the price of identity fraud.
What do I do?
My refund, though.
I'm freaking out.
Don't worry, I can fix this.
LifeLock fixes identity theft guaranteed and gets your money back with up to $3 million in coverage.
I'm so relieved.
No problem. I'll be with you every step of the way.
1 in 4 was a fraud-paying American. Not anymore. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
From the powerhouse blowtorch, warming up the airwaves, it, of course, is Talk Radio 77 WABC, broadcasting from the center of the universe, New York City, as we welcome you, no matter where you are around the nation, the world, or even in the cosmos. Another exciting Dr. Sky Experience just around the corner. As we like to think about it, it's theater of the mind. Why? As we come to you, ladies and gentlemen, in your mind, in your homes, in your vehicles, and where else. Talking about great subjects from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. As always, to get in touch with us, the contact line and contact number is 1-800-848-9222. 1-800-848-9222. And as mentioned many times before, we love conversation in the form of dialogue with critical thinking as we continue with Theater of the Mind. And just a reminder, a good portion of the nation is now going to experience something that many of you may like or detest, the arrival of daylight saving time. 30% of the world's nations use daylight saving time. Here in the USA, Hawaii, most of Arizona, where I am, except for the Navajo Nation, do not observe daylight saving time. But how about this? The great Benjamin Franklin, whose face adorns the $100 bill and is often thought to be a president when the question comes up, what president is on the $100 bill? Well, Benjamin Franklin, in his great scientific excellence, proposed back in 1784 on a visit to France the concept of this thing called daylight saving time. Closer to us as to why the implementation happened a little later, New Zealand entomologist and astronomer George Hudson proposed using daylight saving time in 1895, and it was actually first observed in portions of Canada and then in Europe in 1916. But as the Earth moves around the sun, daylight saving time, as you know, sprang forward in just a number of hours. What do we have tonight, ladies and gentlemen, into the early morning hours on the Dr. Sky Experience? Tonight's adventure, we move into the realm, once again, of American exceptionalism. And talking about things that make America great, and why not? Great topics always to be listened to, and stories that you, ladies and gentlemen, could share with us. But a very special guest, as we introduce him in just a moment, a gentleman who's written a book entitled Be the Weight Behind the Spear. Lots to say about that book, but as we introduce our special guest, who is he? Air Force Colonel and physician, Dr. Josh Blackjack McConkey, commander of the 459th Aeromedical Staging Squadron, served 5 years at Fort Bragg's Womack Medical Center, and involved with the 724th Special Tactics Group, supporting teams like Tier 1. Lots to say about this particular subject, Be the Weight of the Spear, how we, through volunteerism and things that make America great, many things that we'll learn from our very special guest, and let's introduce him and welcome him in his state of North Carolina. Let's welcome Colonel and physician Josh McConkey. Thank you for joining us, sir. Appreciate you being with us on the Dr. Sky Experience. How are you?
Dr. Sky, thank you very much. It's an honor to be on the show.
Well, thank you, my friend. So much to talk about. But in the world right now, obviously, we'll be digging into your military background, though, of course, you're not speaking on behalf of the Department of War or any of those different organizations. But obviously, the world now is looking at not our second week of involvement with an Iran war, Operation Epic Fury, and Israel's Operation Lion's Roar. The counterside to that is Iran's often mentioned Operation Madman, striking back, but striking back less and less each day. But let's begin this particular program with the solemn memory of the 6 military members that have perished, and we understand the President of the United States honored their service to our nation. Thank you again, Colonel, and talk a little bit about your background, how you got started here. A very interesting subject as we talk many, many things, and also I want to mention in this particular program how we as Americans and anybody listening around the world always refuse to be a victim because there's so many things people are worried about and many of the things that they can do to calm their nerves, but to be prepared. Talk about the definition and the reason for writing Be the Weight Behind the Spear.
Well, be the weight behind the spear. It's my personal leadership ethos. As a military commander and a community leader, I've had some very unique opportunities to work with some special operations. I've worked with combat search and rescue. These are some of the individuals that jump into very dangerous situations, into the most dangerous environments on planet Earth to rescue men and women. And, I learned a lot from them. That really is the tip of the spear. When you look at those tier 1 teams kicking down doors, taking down bin Laden, rescuing those children trapped in the Thai caves in 2018, I don't do those things, right? I don't jump out of helicopters. I save lives. I don't take them. But I realize that what makes these individuals so special, it's the weight behind their spear. And that tip of the spear, it's teachers, coaches, volunteers, and families. And that's really what separates, America from the rest of the world. That's what makes us special, that exceptionalism. It's our people.
Absolutely. And jumping fast forward into your book, one of the Latin phrases that I love and hope I pronounce it correctly, gravite hastem, translated simply to be what? Gravity of the spear, an important concept.
That's the weight behind the spear. I've got that on my challenge coin as well that I hand out to people.
That's awesome, my friend. This is interesting. Your background, describe it, because it's not every day we get someone with medical knowledge here in the particular part of the military in connection with it. Talk a little bit about your background, where you got started, and your, of course, migration to the United States military.
So I grew up in a very small town in rural western Nebraska. My dad, a whole lineage of railroaders. My dad, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, all railroaders. And I was the first McConkey to go to college, literally aunts, uncles, cousins, anybody, and was always the math and science nerd. So I went to a school in western Nebraska, Chadron State College, and anybody who follows college football may have heard of Don Beebe or Danny Woodhead, if you're into sports at all. But,
Right.
They were grads of Chadron State as well. And then I joined the military in the National Guard and was recruited initially to be doing medical missions in Central America, Belize, Honduras. This is in 2000. And then obviously after 9/11, things changed, and we've basically been at war my entire career. So, as soon as I finished my emergency medicine residency, I had finished flight surgery as well. And so was a young captain and did medevac in Iraq. And it's been a wild 24 years in the military.
Amazing career. A privilege and honor to have you, our special guest, as we continue for the 2 hours on the Dr. Sky Experience, the author of a great book that we'll be going into detail about, and you with, of course, your questions and comments at 1-800-848-9222. Who is he? Air Force Colonel and physician, Josh Blackjack McConkey. Very interesting story here we have, ladies and gentlemen, and a very special guest to talk about American exceptionalism, as we do talk, Doctor and Colonel, many, many times, and we're very proud to do that here on this particular archive. I want to get into something that I think many people may know, but the depth of your information on this, to share it with us, I think is so important. Family values. Talk about that. I mean, it's unfortunate that in many cases we've lost the dinner table conversation that we had many years ago. I know I had it for a while. I wasn't always a cooperative child, and I got what was coming to me when I wasn't. But I'm not inventing that, right? What's happened to the whole thing about the family dinner time and the people spending time with what we call family values?
So American life is busy. We're pulled in hundreds of different directions. So much of life is now lived on social media and iPads and meetings on Zoom. I think people have kind of lost that need to have time together. And when you talk about things that you can do as a family, helping build leadership skills and building up this youngest generation that really, really has struggled. As a military commander, I will tell you, 18 to 25 years old, even, to 30 years old, a lot of these individuals lack communication skills, the resiliency, and just something simple you can start in your house, right?
Yes.
Just find that time to sit down as a family, have a meal together. And for me, it's busy in our household too. We've got soccer and volleyball and basketball, but just sit down with your children and it lets them know that they're important. I ask them what went well in your day, what didn't go well, and then possibly what decisions could have been made differently to change that outcome. But things like that gives your kids the ability, just knowing that they're safe at home, they can learn from those mistakes, and that's how they grow.
Well, many have said, and as these are words that you've expressed to us and given us a good definition, but the denigration of the family, this is something very important here because it all starts with the family values, as we're talking about. But moving on to something else, too. This goes not just for people who are in a home as a family. Talk about the concept of integrity. I mean, we've had many people in the past, not here on this particular archive, but in my own lifetime, who've talked about morality, and that's a very deep subject, but we're not here to go down that road per se, but the importance of integrity. I mean, the word itself, maybe many people really don't know what the real definition of that is. Describe it to us in your terms.
If you put it in the most simple of terms, it's doing the right thing even when no one else is watching, or just doing the right thing in just some extreme circumstances. And for me personally, probably the most difficult thing that I went through was a business in Texas about 2019, 2020, so just before COVID, but was involved in a business. It was a freestanding emergency department that was doing extremely well, making very good money. But unfortunately, on some forensic accounting reviews, we kind of sensed some problems, and a CEO was embezzling money, had charged over $90,000 for some sexual harassment lawsuit at another business. And basically, at the end of the day, I had called him out, and he offered me a $3.4 million bribe to just kind of walk away. I had already filed complaints with the FBI and Texas Department of Insurance. And, he found the one guy on planet Earth that would turn down $3.4 million. I told him, listen, I'm a colonel of the United States Air Force. I won't compromise my integrity for a single penny. And unfortunately, he just punished us, ran the business into the ground because he was a majority shareholder. And I ended up losing about $5 million.
Ouch.
But, I did the right thing, and I showed that example to my children, and it just didn't go my way because COVID hit. And when we filed the lawsuit to prevent him from bankrupting the company, it froze and we couldn't get a court date, but just bad timing on my part.
Well, Colonel, that's integrity with a capital I, in my opinion, and I'm sure many people would agree. That's difficult. I mean, business is business, but integrity is something, obviously, that we're talking about here. And obviously, I'm not perfect, nor are the listeners, nor yourself, but the point of the matter is so many points that you bring up in the book. Be the weight behind the spear. Such an important topic and so many of the things we talk about. But let's get into the other one that I think a lot of young people today certainly can, of course, improve their lives with the concept of leadership. And it starts right again, in my opinion, with the family. But what say you? You're the author of the book.
That family offers, for me, my family is the thing that I am by far the most proud of. My wife, Elsa, was an elementary school art teacher when I met her. And, I was more of that grizzled combat veteran, coming back from Iraq, it was very hard transitioning back to civilian life. after being in combat and just seeing a lot of horrible and terrible things. But it was a great combination. And we've now been blessed with 3 kids. If there's any mothers or parents of multiples out there, we went from 0 to 3 children in 19 months, which is crazy. So a 1-year-old and then twins shortly after that. And, it keeps you grounded. It keeps you focused. And just understanding that family structure and what that brings to the table, like in your life, it helps balance everything. And, that for me, that's always been number one.
And this goes out to the listeners of the Dr. Sky Experience with our special edition of American Exceptionalism with great guests, as you tell us. My email is drsky@wabcradio.com. Comments, of course, are always responded to. And also, if you have some suggestions, we don't guarantee we'll get them all, but people that you would like to hear from, that's what I do 24/7 here, is seek out the very best. But ladies and gentlemen, what's your opinion? Are you also on the bandwagon about the structure of the family and how that's been denigrated, the subject of integrity, and then we move on to the subject of leadership, and finally, of these 4, and there's many, many more, accountability. Now, this goes into the political realm big time. So does leadership, so does integrity, and what can you add to the conversation about the subject of accountability? That's a big one.
Well, I think with a lot of leadership, and certainly you will see that in politics, but accountability, it really, when you talk about integrity and accountability, those are probably the 2 most important pieces of leadership. And, we've unfortunately seen what happens when you lack both. But just very simply with accountability, when you see people uncouple their decisions and their actions from the accountability for those decisions or actions, that's where things devolve very quickly. It turns into Lord of the Flies. I know here in just North Carolina, we've had, just some of the crime policies and, some decisions that were made that, I think everyone's familiar with the Irina Zarutska case here, where there was an individual that had been arrested 14 separate times. Yes. And unfortunately, some of the current governor and, the attorney general at the time passed some laws that just kicked these guys right back onto the street. And unfortunately, there was a young woman coming home from a job at the pizza joint on Friday night and was stabbed right there on a public bus, and it was on camera for everyone to watch. It was just horrific. But those types of things, that's how it devolves when you take away accountability, because we had some magistrates that had made those types of decisions to kick these people straight out, and it did not end well.
Our number here on the Dr. Sky Experience, 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. If you're just joining us for the 2 hours, a very special guest, we call him a friend of the show, Air Force Colonel and physician Josh Blackjack McConkey. His book, Be the Weight of the Spear, Be the Weight Behind the Spear, to say it correctly. So much information in this short time that we have with you today and tonight and early into the morning. A very important subject indeed. Let's go back to the medical side of the world. I worked in hospitals, and in the military in the short time I was Army. I worked in the military side of the lab and in the EMT side of the equation. But you do something different, and everybody's important in this. But describe the environment being a flight surgeon. I mean, this is interesting. You've seen the worst of the worst and have saved many, many lives. But just describe that career path and what got you really interested to become, in that realm, a physician. That's also an important question.
Yeah, so I think for the first one, just deciding to become a physician, I always enjoyed math and science. My stepmom was a nurse, and she told so many stories from the emergency departments and from her medical training back in Omaha, Nebraska, which is a larger city in eastern Nebraska. Again, I grew up in a very small rural town, so these stories were just, you didn't see things like that where I grew up, and those types of stories you only saw on TV, right? So the early days of ER, if anybody remembers that television show, that was going on when I was starting college.
Yes, very interesting.
And so you listen to those types of stories and decide, wow, that sounds like a crazy career. I should do that. And I've always been an adrenaline junkie. So the first couple of codes that you run in an emergency department, the first shootings or stabbings, and things are always crazy. But I just found that in those situations, I was sharper. It just
Sure.
things came into focus for me. Either you can handle that type of pressure or you can't. And there's plenty of very smart people that just can't handle those types of high pressure situations. But for me, it just naturally gravitated towards the military and doing flight medicine. For people that don't know what that is, a flight surgeon is basically a doctor that takes care of air crews and pilots and has some of that occupational health oversight of flight medicine itself. Like we call it aerospace medicine in the Air Force side of things, but I served as a flight surgeon in both the Army and the Air Force. And on the Army side, I found myself in Iraq flying medevac missions, one air assault, which was by far the craziest thing I've ever done. And on the Air Force side, doing aerospace medicine, I've served as a critical care air transport physician, and that's a mobile ICU team that can be anywhere on planet Earth in 24 hours or less with about $300,000 worth of equipment on backpacks. We're better equipped than any third world hospital, and it's very, very exciting, and I think probably the best mission in the entire Department of War.
Well, blessings to you and the men and women, of course, on the front line to, how do I say this, to repair from the horrific, sides of war, the big, the horrible things that happen, the casualties and trying to save people's lives. Our hearts go out to you and to all those that have passed who serve our country. Let's go to the callers. You're lighting up the line right now, and let's say good morning to Andy in Westchester. Good morning, Andy. You're, of course, with us with Air Force Colonel, Physician Josh Blackjack McConkey. How are you doing this morning?
Okay, gentlemen, great show. And Blackjack, I like that name, Blackjack. First of all, some of our best medical doctors get their best training in the inner cities, in the worst neighborhoods. They're used to dealing with bullet wounds and knife wounds and all kinds of broken bodies better than anywhere else around the country. We've seen this country be destroyed the last, I'd say, 65 years when the left have basically taken over the Democratic Party. They don't want to put criminals in jail. They don't want to have any bail. They want to just release people into the streets. And I've always said, if you want to take over America, you don't put on a uniform. You just release criminals into the streets and let them run wild, destroy neighborhoods. The only reason why this thing never hit the fan was because America is so big, and all these people that talk big, they all ran. They never did nothing. They ran out of the neighborhoods. There are people now, if you're over 40, 50 years old, you might have already moved 4 or 5 times inside America to get away from the high crime. And they'll always use these kinds of jargon.
Yeah, big problem, Andy. I know. But, Colonel, response, this is interesting here. Andy brings up, as he's a regular caller, so many important, topics here, along with the subjects of American exceptionalism. Your response, Colonel?
Yeah, well, Andy, first off, do you know the 106th Rescue Squadron that's right out there in Westchester near you?
I don't know if he's with us. Are you still with us, Andy?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So there's a rescue squadron right out near you. I know some of the individuals in that squadron, or at least used to. So you have some amazing individuals out there near you. And, regarding that, I would agree with you. And you'll see that in a lot of the Democrat-run cities, specifically some cities around North Carolina where I live, Charlotte. They've had a lot of these soft on crime policies. The sanctuary cities, they don't enforce federal law, and the crime is certainly rising. And you hear some of these just terrible injuries and cases of crime against just law-abiding citizens, and it's kind of a cascading effect. I think we're moving back towards some sanity, and a lot of people have realized how those types of policies are just not successful. But it's a constant battle. I know I live here in the Raleigh area, and, we have a lot different take on things than a lot of inner city Charlotte, that's for sure.
And I love that area, Captain. And Doctor, that's a beautiful area of the country, Research Triangle Park and the whole area there. I've spent a lot of time. But, Andy, stay tuned through the show. Obviously, we appreciate your commentary and everybody at 1-800-848-9222. What I'd like to do in maybe part of this hour, the first hour of the show, and maybe deeper into the second hour, I want to give everybody, Doctor and Captain, some solutions from your side of the equation, from the medical side. And I'll just tease it real quick because we've got other callers here. I've spent a lot of time in the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office when I was doing this for 22 years. And we took a lot of classes. It was everything from CPR, not combat medicine per se, but we knew how to just bandage somebody up and do the right thing so that they could survive. And throughout this show, I'd like to have you, and we'll do this later, we'll save the best for later, give us some ideas on how to be prepared. I mean, everybody out there, not to panic people, but I think it's so important in these, quote, troubling times that people need to have some sort of preparation. I don't want to alarm people, but what say you, Doctor? I mean, this is an important part to make people ready so they're not becoming victims. How's that?
Yeah, that's so important. Like, don't take that victim mentality, right? Like, what can you do? Training is super important. There's some great training courses out there called Stop the Bleed. Well, they'll train lay people and non-medical personnel on
Precisely.
things that you could do if you find yourself in a terrible situation like that, or you come across some horrific injuries, stabbings, shootings, or you're seeing some blood loss. How to start tourniquets, how to apply that pressure, and just people that don't have that medical background, you can get some of that training out in your community, and it really does save lives during some of these mass casualty events. It's very well studied, and the evidence has been very supportive of it.
And more that we hear, tragically, the different shootings from schools or in public locations. I mean, look, just last week we found out that there was someone allegedly aligned with the Islamic radical side of the equation, of, again, talking and proponent, that is, of what was going on in Iran, walking into, a bar and a restaurant where people were celebrating in Austin, Texas. That's a horrific thing, obviously, and ways to stop it, that's another subject. But to be prepared, how many lives could we save if we just had a little bit of preparation on our side? And I know it sounds like maybe I'm lecturing from the pulpit, hardly, because you know this, sir, of all the people that have come into the ER. What, if they had some better preparation, maybe? Who knows how many lives would have been saved? But a little bit can go a long way, no doubt, right?
Yeah, boy, tourniquets save lives, and that pressure and just some basic airway interventions, just those types of things. CPR, when you talk about like heart attacks and strokes, just some of those basic life support, you can, those courses are all available in your communities, at local hospitals. Get out there and get some of that training, and I think that really helps prepare you. Hopefully you don't encounter any of those types of situations, but there's certainly training out there, and don't just be a victim. Be prepared.
And something we can also do, and I've said this for years on other programs, the definition of a victim, I didn't create it, is simply someone with no options. Always fight back legally and responsibly is the easy way to say it, but you know better, sir, from the emergency rooms and in the battle, right on the battlefield. And we hope and pray to God that that battlefield never does come to this great nation. As we talk about American exceptionalism, as we do often, ladies and gentlemen, not to diverge too much from the normal subjects, astronomy, space, aviation, and weather, and we talk with celebrity guests that, of course, enlighten us here on the Dr. Sky Experience, as we talk of what we call the theater of the mind, as you're listening in your mind, as you're driving, and also in your homes. The contact number here, 1-800-848-9222. If we haven't gotten to you, like Vinny in New Jersey and others that'll be on the line, we certainly appreciate this kind of a thing, which we call the dialogue with critical thinking, talking about subjects that probably, hopefully, enlighten everybody, getting what, Doctor? A little bit of information to build us stronger as we continue to be what? The gravity of the spear, gravite, hastum, in Latin. And another interesting quote before we go to the break, we've said it many times before, tribulatio ditat, which simply means, in simple English, troubles can make us stronger. We appreciate that. And as we also mentioned, if you'd like to listen to previous broadcasts of the Dr. Sky Experience, simply go to WABCRadio.com or RedAppleAudioNetworks.com, where you can listen to these particular broadcasts and how about all the other great hosts 24/7 on this blowtorch powerhouse, as I like to call it. This beaming out across the nation, around the world, and maybe even out into the cosmos. We'll be right back with your questions and comments on the Dr. Sky Experience.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
I'm cocked, locked, and ready to rock, Doc. Hey, working hard, playing hard, America. This is your blood brother, Ted Nugent, celebrating the American dream and our Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms. With my blood brother, Steve Cates. Stand up for what you believe in, my friends.
Americans play to win all the time. I wouldn't give a hoot in hell for a man who lost and laughed. That's why Americans have never lost, nor will ever lose a war, for the very idea of losing is hateful to an American. A quote from the late, great General George S. Patton. We continue with 31 minutes after the hour, and if you're just joining us, ladies and gentlemen, always time to get in on the conversation at 1-800-848-9222. Who is gracing us with his information? None other than Air Force Colonel and physician Josh Blackjack McConkey, author of the book, Be the Weight Behind the Spear. Doctor, Colonel, I'd like to continue on with our special guests here. We have Vinny in New Jersey. Vinny, good morning. You're on with the good Colonel and physician. How are you?
Oh, God, it's great talking to you guys and the Colonel. Dr. Sky, let me tell you, my wife had a heart valve replacement, and it's amazing what they do. They didn't have to cut her chest open, number one, which is great. And
I hope she's okay.
She's good. And to your guest there, my two uncles were killed in World War II, a month apart. And my grandparents got the letter of the first son that was killed, and then the second son a month later. How do you deal with that? My aunt said, my grandfather howled for years, howled. That's how she said it.
Oh, Doctor, your expertise in this subject is way beyond my level. But a little bit of comfort. Yeah. But, Vinny, from me to you, God bless the family members. And, I don't know, God bless their service. And, Doctor, carry on because that's not my expertise.
Yeah, absolutely, Vinny. Thank you so much. You know, those Gold Star families, America owes them so much. So, thank your family for their service and for their memory. Me personally, I do feel like that World War II generation is the greatest generation. They literally saved the world, from Nazi tyranny and, the lives lost. I think, 270 or 80,000 Americans total lost their lives in World War II, if my memory is correct. I've carried body bags of American heroes off battlefields. I served in Iraq in 2007, and those memories definitely stick with you. It's something that, for me personally, I wake up every single morning thinking about those men and women that paid that ultimate sacrifice.
Absolutely.
It's when people ask me, like, what motivates you? Like, why are you so driven, as an emergency physician, commander, author, and it's those memories. I have to make sure that those sacrifices are worth it. I think about them first thing. I see my wife in the morning, and then I go wake up my three kids. They're all teenagers now. It's not as much fun waking them up as it used to be.
Yeah, sure.
But I feel super blessed, just super blessed, and I think about those sacrifices every day.
Well, Vinny, you get the last word, and again, our condolences, but your words.
Yeah, I wasn't born then, and I asked my mother's sister, I said, how did they do that? And she said, oh, my God. She just said, my daddy howled, because they were Southern down in North Carolina. She said he howled for months and months to lose two sons in 2 months. God almighty.
Yes. Blessings, my friend, because I don't know. I mean, no words, right, Vinny, can describe that pain that people have like that. But
no, there's not.
Yeah, we do our best to try to, honor our warfighters and those like our good guest this morning in talking about ways that individuals can be involved to be the weight behind the spear. Thank you, Vinny. Blessings to you and your family, and thanks for joining us. Let's continue on. We welcome Steve in New Jersey. Good morning, Steve. Your observations, comments, or questions, we appreciate you. Please continue.
I'd just like to talk about something. My son is also a full bird in the Army. He's teaching at the War College at the moment, which is kind of impressive in our family. And back in 2000, before 9/11, he was an ambulance platoon leader up in Fort Drum. He was a lieutenant, brand new, Army guy. And he had an idea. They took his unit, they took his platoon, and they stuck it down at West Point for the summer as kind of an auxiliary bunch of people just to help out. And, of course, you know the Army. The Army, if you're not doing anything, if you have idle hands, you wind up filling sandbags. At least that was my experience back in the day.
Yes, and you have to do something, right? I did it myself.
You had a highly skilled bunch of medics. You can find other things to do. So what he did, he came up with an idea, and he gave me a call because I used to work for New York City. And he wanted to know if it was possible for his guys to get involved with EMS in New York City and actually just go down and kind of observe in the hospitals and see what they did. Because, again, these guys were, combat medics. We weren't in war at that point in time. And surprise, surprise, I actually came up with a guy who knew somebody who knew somebody who knew the guy who was running EMS, who happened to be a Vietnam vet medic. And we put it to him, and he said, great, if the Army goes along with it. So surprisingly, Stephen was able to get his colonel to sign off on it. So his guys came down to New York City and wound up riding ambulances. They had to wear civvies. They couldn't wear their uniforms because they were going to scare people to death, I guess. So they all went out and they got like blue coveralls like the EMS people had. And, of course, they were told, hands off. They couldn't touch any of the patients. So they wound up riding ambulances in Harlem and the South Bronx.
That's interesting.
For about a month. And what happened, of course, was the first time you show up at a gunshot scene, the whole thing about hands off goes right out the window because you need fingers to plug holes. So he went ahead and he did this, and they did it for over a month. He was living at home at the time. He was able to come out here to Jersey and spend the nights. I remember a couple of nights when he came home and he said, I'm not coming in until I hose myself off, because he was covered with blood and vomit.
Oh, God
and
bless.
It was a 1 month long thing that they did. And unfortunately, his guys, you got to wonder that, what happens, 9/11 happens, Afghanistan happens, Iraq happens, and all these guys went off to war. And you got to wonder how many lives they saved. Because
absolutely. Our tribute could go on, Steve, forever on this. But, Colonel, your response as time is, moving through here, time and space. But, Steve, it's amazing what you're telling us. But I wanted the good Colonel to respond to.
Yeah, and those were probably some early days of, they've got several programs like that now that have been running for well over 20 years. Maybe that was one of the very first, but they do a lot of these community programs in Miami, St. Louis, Cincinnati, and you get that community along with the military providers for combat search and rescue, your paramedics, your flight medics. They all do some of those rotations now, and they're super valuable. And you are correct. They've saved many, many lives. We've been at war a lot of my career.
Well, thank you, Steve, in New Jersey, for connecting the dots as we expand our radio show. And again, ladies and gentlemen, the callers rule here because lots of opinions, lots of everything out there. We just want to make sure that people are engaged when they listen to this particular radio station. And, of course, the Dr. Sky Experience. Once again, 1-800-848-9222. But before we go to the next break, I know you have something that you want to share with us. You have a great story about the importance of family during an air assault. Describe that, if you would, Colonel.
Yeah, so, if there's, the math and science nerds out there, any biologists out there, my one air assault that I had done in 2007, there was a 2-week span where they were shooting down American helicopters. So the Iranians had given acoustic software. They shot down 8 helicopters in 2 weeks. They killed a flight surgeon 2 weeks before I got there.
Whoa.
And the day I landed in theater, one of our helicopters was shot down. So my air assault mission that I was flying, I was there for 45 Cav soldiers in the back. It's 3 o'clock in the morning with night vision goggles. I'm flying the jump seat between the 2 pilots. And as we going to get some very, very bad dudes, there'd been lots of mortar activity, rockets, and sniper fire. So we were so tired of the guerrilla tactics, we had a target. It's 3 a.m. And as we're landing the helicopter, the first lieutenant is giving us some last-second intelligence that due east of that landing zone is an anti-aircraft weapon. So the acoustic Iranian, that they're shooting all the helicopters. And that's exactly where we had to fly over, because on those air assaults, it's very coordinated. You have to go that due east, or you run into somebody else. And as we start taking off and you see that tracer fire, I watched my life just flash in front of my eyes, and for 30 seconds to a minute.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was waiting to die. And the things that I thought about were family. Nobody cares about how big your house is or how big your car is or how much money you make. It's family. I didn't have children yet, so for a biology nerd, all I thought was, wow, this is how I die. I've contributed nothing to the gene pool of humanity, and I'm a complete and total failure. So, that
what a story.
Important.
Right, and only the war fighters know that, the men and women who've been in combat, and not just this particular war, Colonel, but in so many of the wars. But here's something interesting going back to this Iranian situation right now. You know this, and, I do a lot in the firearm training world out here, and for years, we've studied what the Chi-Com weapons are and all the other weapons around the world. But tell me, this is not fiction. So many of our American troops have been shot at by the Iranian snipers with their Dragunov rifles. And those rifles are pretty powerful. They're comparable to a .308 round, to 7.62 by 54R, as they call it, an old Russian round. But not to get too technical on firearms, but amazing. This is payback time. I mean, look at all those people that were shot at by the embedded Iranian snipers. And now it's payback time for many of those. You know that.
Yeah, and you go all the way back to the barracks bombing in the 80s, my time in Iraq, Afghanistan. The Iranians have just been spreading devastation, and they literally, their leadership, that regime woke up. They're not waking up anymore. They woke up every single day asking themselves, how can I murder more Americans? That's what motivated them. And, this action was a long time in coming.
Well, if anybody hasn't seen the Hollywood version, American Sniper, obviously, I don't know your opinion, but I thought it did pretty good justice to showing some of what's going on in war. But that's Hollywood. What say you? Was it fairly, a good replication of what was going on against, these Iranian snipers and other people using RPGs? I don't think Hollywood could get it exactly, but how do you think they did with the movie of American Sniper?
Yeah, no, they did a wonderful job in that. Bradley Cooper, that was a great role for him. I know he put a ton of research, and it was quite real. And from my experience in combat and dealing with those injuries, that job that he did, it was a fantastic movie, very accurate.
Absolutely, people should see it. Long live the memory of those individuals like yourselves that are still here to talk about it and the lives that you've saved as we continue to talk here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Ladies and gentlemen, if we haven't gotten to you like Eddie in Babylon and other callers, the number here, 1-800-848-9222. A rare opportunity to someone who talks the talk and walks it, in my opinion. A doctor, a physician. He knows his stuff in the ER and beyond, and also serving his country in his own roles in the Army and also in the United States Air Force. As we continue here with Air Force Colonel and physician Josh Blackjack McConkey, we're going to get deeper into your book and definitely into hour number 2 and talk about things that people can do to protect themselves, at least as we can now, in these so-called troubled times. This is a very interesting story, and it continues here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Always great guests, ladies and gentlemen, as you tell us, and as I mentioned it, and I'm proud to say it again, your questions and comments to me after hours off the show, off of airtime, is just DRSKY at WABCRadio.com. We'll be right back here on the Dr. Sky Experience, and as they say, don't touch that dial.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hey, this is Greg Kim. But don't be in jeopardy. Continue to listen to the Dr. Sky Show. It's good for your health.
America is another name for opportunity. A quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. 45 minutes after the hour, we continue, ladies and gentlemen, with our callers, and we welcome to the microphones, live on the air, Eddie in Babylon. Good morning. How are you?
It's a profound pleasure and a lot of respect to you two. The more we get to know you, Dr. Sky, and your guests, which is a book I will absolutely read. I think about coming home from being out with my friends and putting the key halfway in the doorknob and seeing a turd and go, "Uh-oh, Dad's awake." And he would say, "You smell like a gin mill. Get in here." and I wasn't in trouble. He'd sit me on the couch and he was watching World at War, and he'd start telling me stories. He would say, it was the reason I go shopping early with your mom is that I'll never stand on another line again. He said, we're standing on a line for the mess tent, and a plane came in, maybe a Mitchell. Was it a B-54 Mitchell? Or I can't remember the number.
B-25,
and it would wag its
maybe.
wings of a successful, a successful mission. And it wagged the wings, but then it turned upside down and crashed into the tent. And he said it killed all my friends.
Oh, my God.
And we buried bodies all night. Yeah, these are the things, they use their parachutes as cushions, sitting on these planes, and they didn't know who packed them. And when the landing gear was shot out, the captain would say, well, we got to go in for a crash on the steel mats in the jungle. You can jump out here, go with me. And my father saw a couple of his friends jump out. The chutes didn't open. He always went in with the captain. We go for the crash landing. And maybe it's in our DNA. People either run toward or they run away. And I always run toward. The day the towers came down, I had my lab coat, trying to keep it intact here, not get too mushy. I just hold him sick to work. I went in to find my sister, and I eventually found her at home after the whole day and handing out water because that's all I could do. There was a gray SUV in the driveway, and I said, that's not my sister's car. And I ran my finger across it. It was black under it. I go, God, Debbie's home. And got into the living room, and there was my mom, my dad, Debbie, and Kathy, the husband. And we all just hugged each other in a circle and laughed and cried. And I figured out what that was. It was tears of joy.
There you go, my friend.
Your DNA wouldn't go on, but, it did. You're here on the phone with me and a million other people. And I thank my friend John for telling me about this program once. And I don't care if it's 3 a.m. till 5. I will be up, Dr. Sky, to listen to this.
Eddie, God bless you, the family. No, I appreciate your interest.
Love you.
Well, God bless you, and we love you, too, and all the callers that call in here, because during the early morning hours, no matter what you're listening to, if it's the West Coast and it's still evening, a lot of people, they want to move on to different subjects, and we talk about everything out into the universe, but we're proud to talk about American exceptionalism. Colonel, I thought Eddie's testimony is pretty, empowering. What do you think?
Boy, those 9/11 stories still get you. That's one of the most impactful moments in American history. And I gave a great speech here in Apex, North Carolina, remembrance for 9/11. I was in uniform on that day, and I just told my story. And, you and your family, thank you for what you guys do. And I'm sure glad that everyone came out of that okay for you. God bless.
Absolutely. Well, God bless you, Eddie, and the family. And a tribute to all those that perished in 9/11, not just here in New York City, but all over the nation. What a horrible day. And that word can never do justice, right, Colonel, with the whole story that went on there and all the wars that we're involved in. Let's shift gears. I know you're not a spokesperson for the Department of War, but give us your assessment, if you don't mind, if you're allowed to speak openly on this, of what's happening right now. Any updates that you can give us from people in the military that you can share with this radio show on Operation Epic Fury?
So again, the men and women in uniform are called upon for peace and liberty, and they're making America a safer place. I can tell you, it was certainly without talking about anything classified, because I still get those classified briefings, but Iran was weeks away from getting a nuclear weapon. And this regime, they aren't crazy like North Korea or like Russia. They will actually use that weapon. And the Iranian, intelligence that was coming out, the Mossad had, obviously very, very tight grips on what was going on within Iran. There really was no decision. So anyone that had any sound mind whatsoever would not have hesitated to take this action. It's literally stopped World War III, and you cannot let Iran get a nuclear weapon. So I know we've lost 6 American service members so far, and my heart goes out to their family.
Likewise.
We are all so appreciative for what they've done and what they've sacrificed, and that's what Americans do, and they're making America a safer place. it's obviously still ongoing, and we wish everyone, Godspeed.
Right, and I hope, as the president's saying, hopefully this is a short war, and we don't know, but what we're getting news reports just before the show came on the air. I can't verify this 100%, but what we read, we don't know always if this is fact. A Maltese flag tanker known as Prima was allegedly hit by an Iranian drone, or many, in the Strait of Hormuz. Whether that's officially closed or not, I'll leave that to the news department and people like that who can, of course, quantify and verify these particular stories. But they're saying, 20% of the world's oil moves through that strait. And I've taken a look at this, like many people have, and I'm sure you have, Colonel. It is a very tiny little area, and no wonder they could do so much damage if they could shut this down. Oil prices, as we see all over the place here in Arizona, we've almost reached $4.80 per gallon. Other parts of the country, like the Deep South, I'm getting reports that's still the high $2.80 area. But for California, right there, Colonel, it's almost, $5 or almost $6 in some places. Totally amazing.
My aunt just flew into North Carolina this evening. She's going to spend the week with our family. It is well over $5 a gallon in Seattle. And when you look at that Strait of Hormuz, over 20%, or right at 20% of the entire world's oil flows through that small strait. Now, right now, it's all but stopped. It's a 95% reduction in traffic. There's almost 200 tankers trapped in the Gulf right now that cannot transit that strait. And, this is something that Iran has done continually and just for decades now. They just hold the world hostage. And this is one of those reasons when you look at I think it's 12 total of their naval vessels that have been sunk, they had to cripple their Navy because this was being done. This one I think was one of the rockets that was fired at a tanker, but they would send out these fast boats, almost like pirates, and just
I've seen them.
Ships going through there. Iran's crazy.
You bet. And I know we've sunk, as you mentioned, one of our submarines actually used a torpedo hit, which hasn't happened, I guess, in quite a long time. A simple direct hit, sending it to the bottom of that little area, which, of course, is now loaded with tankers that want to get through. But again, kudos to the Israelis in Operation Lion's Roar. Apparently, they used a very high-tech type of almost what we call like a space-type missile, in which they flew or shot this from one of their F-15s going up into the reaches of outer space, and it was a two-stage type missile, of course controlled by sophisticated GPS, and actually found the location through the Mossad and other intelligence like the CIA. Wow, what a direct hit on the leadership of the entire Iranian military and their government. That's amazing to go that high up into the Earth's atmosphere and almost into space. Pretty amazing technology right there, Colonel.
Oh, it's incredible. And I won't be able to confirm or deny any of that. We'll let what's been out there in public speak for that right now.
Sure, I understand.
But it certainly was very remarkable. And when you look at the 88 individuals that were at that meeting, that's basically the remnants of what was taken out previously with the 40 in the leadership and the Ayatollah. And then the 88 that were getting together to vote for the next Ayatollah and Supreme Leader met their end as well. So, there's still a lot of work to do, but boy, they've really decapitated their leadership.
Well, absolutely. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, you are what make the radio show successful. That is the listeners and the callers. 1-800-848-9222 if you'd like to step up to the stage in our Theater of the Mind, as we call it here in the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll be going later on as in hour number 2 to Bob in Westchester. And you, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm sure have questions and comments to this very, very interesting time. Ways that we, of course, can be the weight behind the spear. An interesting conversation. We love dialogue in the form of critical thinking. And I think you would agree, Colonel, right? Two very interesting things, dialogue and critical thinking. And something that I think should be taught. Not that I'm on a pulpit. I think that's a very important subject. Just talk briefly, we have a few minutes, about the concept of critical thinking. How about that?
That critical thinking is so important, and I think that skill is what's being missed out on in schools. I've got 3 children in school, and I know the public schools here in North Carolina, I can certainly speak, when you even look at like math and science, they're basically only 25% of kids in these schools are at their grade level, and they are just woefully deficient in just critical thinking skills and those reading skills. And I think it has a lot to do with some of the social media world that they live in.
Exactly.
That's certainly their reality. I mean, that perception of the world is their reality. And as strange as it is for you and me, I mean, they don't even have to get bullied in person anymore, right? They can just badger someone on a social media account. You don't even have to punch someone in the nose. So, they lack those critical thinking skills. They see whatever flashes across whatever platform they're on, and they lack the critical skills to just evaluate, number one, the source of where that's coming from, and then critically analyzing that and coming up with their own thoughts. It's definitely a challenge. It's something I work on as a military commander, and I certainly see a lot of problems that end up in my emergency room.
Well, look at Charlie Kirk for a moment. I mean, the sad loss of Charlie Kirk. What would he do, Colonel? He would sit there and take on people who disagreed with him, and some of them were obviously really totally disrespectful, foul language, all kinds of crazy curveballs they're throwing at him. But he wanted to have a dialogue, and he wanted it in critical thinking. So you're absolutely right. We don't always have to agree on every kind of subject, but let's at least come to the table, right, to discuss a subject. What about like when we were in school? I know we had debate class, and we had to go up there and do the best we could. If we were good at it, we got a little award. If we were bad at it, we were told how to be better at it and come back for more. But that, in my opinion, misses out in a big way today in the world. The whole object of having critical thinking through debate and dialogue.
That was Charlie's legacy. And just getting out there in very hostile environments, in universities all across the country, a lot of them he was not welcomed at. But he went out there anyways, and he created that dialogue, and he engaged this generation. That was his biggest contribution to America, was keeping that young population in the fold, getting them engaged, getting them to talk, critically think, and analyze. And unfortunately, he was murdered for it.
That's so sad. Long live the legacy of Charlie Kirk and others like him as we continue here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Ladies and gentlemen, 1-800-848-9222. We, of course, are getting many, many callers here. We will continue on in hour number 2. And if you're just joining us, here's our special guest, Air Force Colonel and physician, that is Josh Blackjack McConkey, commander of the 459th Aeromedical Staging Squadron, much, much more. He's the author of a book that we'll be getting into called B, The Weight Behind the Spear. And as promised, right, Colonel, we'll give some ideas about how people can do things like setting up a go bag, getting yourself prepared for what? Small emergencies medically, or maybe even save a life by having the proper training and the proper preparation so you are never a victim. We'll be right back as we end hour number 1 on a joyous note, and hopefully everybody would agree.
Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
You're with me on this powerhouse blowtorch. Talk Radio 77 WABC, simply warming up the airwaves around the nation and the world and broadcasting proudly from the center of the universe, New York City. Welcome to hour number 2 of the Dr. Sky Experience. We like to call it Theater of the Mind and engage our listeners and callers at 1-800-848-9222. If you're just joining us, a very special guest, author of a book entitled B, The Weight Behind the Spear. Who is he? Air Force Colonel and physician Josh Blackjack McConkey. He's with us for this hour number 2, ladies and gentlemen, and we continue. Well, Colonel, let's talk a little bit about the meaning and significance of the spear. Relate that to the movie 300, a very phenomenal movie with Gerard Butler. Seen it many times. To describe it to those who haven't, the meaning of the spear and significance.
So that movie 300 is like 300 soldiers against the Xerxes God King, one of the Persian kings, and the movie basically has Gerard Butler, who takes these 300 men and fights an army of tens of thousands, I think it might even 100,000 soldiers, and held them off for a while. And it just talked about the teamwork and the spear and how potent that was. I mean, trained from birth. I mean, these 300 were just, it's the weight behind the spear that makes it so sharp and deadly. That spear in anyone else's hands, it's worthless. So that weight behind the spear is everything. And so that really is something that I've turned into my personal leadership ethos. I've used it throughout communities and in the military as a commander. And that's really that call to action for people to get engaged and be that weight behind the spear so that our police, our firefighters, first responders, and our military can be that point of the spear when they need to be. And it makes it sharper and more pointy and more efficient. But it's the weight behind the spear that makes it so powerful.
Well, Colonel, I appreciate you. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, the good website that you should go to for the Colonel is Weight Beyond the Spear, as we talk about the spear, and the book, Be the Weight Behind the Spear. Once again, his website, weightbeyondthespear.com. Something I find fascinating in your book, and I really mean this is very interesting, as we go through not every chapter of the 16 that are there. Great information. They should get a copy of the book, and we'll talk about later how people can do that. But let's talk about something that really came to my attention, and I think it's so important. And what is that, Colonel? Is that if you look at the Communist Chinese, obviously they have something called a 100-year plan. And that's something that you, of course, pitched toward in your book, that we need in America, a 100-year plan. Why not here in America, too? Not a communist Chinese plan, but describe the effectiveness of their plan and their long-range thinking. That's an important thing for them, and they stick by it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so first off, that website, it's weightbehindthespear.com. It's WEIGHT, so okay. You can definitely learn more there. Yes, and with that Chinese 100-year plan, they know exactly where they're going. They know exactly what they're doing. Nothing is going to stop them, certainly not their people, because they just kill whoever gets in their way. But they use our democracy against us because they know that America has, at best, our senators have a 6-year plan. Our congressmen have a 2-year plan. And even the president has a 4-year plan. And in America, things are all about kind of that political power and getting reelected. But at some point, we need to have a cohesive – I mean, you just see the drunk driver type analogy where Biden goes super left, wide open borders, just basically no national security plan. And then, right now, I'm much happier with where we're going. But it just swings back and forth, left and right. We need to have a cohesive, more 100-year plan because the Chinese are just dancing right around us. Now, certainly right now, the Trump administration has done a fantastic job. You choke off China from the Venezuelan oil. It's probably going to take down Cuba along with it. Now you've got rid of a very dangerous Iranian regime. And China has about a 100-day oil reserves.
Right. They're so dependent on the Iranian oil shipments. Yes, you're right. Absolutely.
We have put them in a very, very bad spot. And in addition to legitimately stopping World War III and nuclear war in the Middle East, this type of action will probably really delay or completely prevent the invasion of Taiwan. So, these are second and third order effects that huge national security implications here. We're playing chess.
Well, the world can be a ball of confusion, as people have sang before, from the Temptations, but being serious, at least we see things happening in real time, and hopefully these things can be sorted out. Just to go to our principle that the callers rule here on this radio show, let's say good morning to Bob in Westchester. You've been patient. Good morning. What say you? You're on WABC.
Good morning, Dr. Sky. Great show, great topic.
Thanks.
Colonel, thank you for your service, Colonel. My question is this. Recently, I was watching the movie Lone Survivor. Did you see that movie?
No, I didn't.
Navy SEALs?
Yeah, I saw it. You bet. Mm-hmm.
The question is this. Most of the Navy SEALs were killed on the mountain in Afghanistan, I believe, because they had no other way of communicating with the responding helicopters. Why didn't the Navy SEALs have handheld mirrors or smoke grenades to indicate their problem when they were trapped? Can you explain that to me?
Colonel?
Well, yeah, certainly those special operators and, in the aircraft, like you do carry those. Now, I don't know kind of what and I watched the movie quite a long time ago. The helicopter crashed and the air crew was killed. I know there was an aircraft incident. It may have been the exact one, Extortion 17, but one of the gentlemen that I served with in Iraq in 2007, Chief Warrant Carter, was one of the he was in piloting command on that aircraft, as a matter of fact. But, they certainly do carry all of that equipment. I'm not sure theatrically how that kind of played out in the movie, but believe me, they do have that equipment.
Well, Bob, I just wanted to mention to you and also to the Colonel, we did a very big, event here in Phoenix many, many years ago with Marcus Luttrell, one of the SEAL team members, and that was an amazing evening. I mean, we sat down with other SEAL team members that were not identified. They just wanted to remain incognito, of course. But that story, Bob, and everything going on over there, kudos to our military and the sad loss that we had. I know there was, Colonel, one loss of a Chinook helicopter with the whole SEAL team. Wasn't that something that happened, just before the end of the crisis in Iraq, if I'm correct? An RPG took down the entire helicopter, a Chinook.
Yeah, I'm just looking it up here, 38 people on board.
Very sad. Well, thank you so much, Bob in Westchester. Let's continue with the callers. Good morning to you, Brian in Valley Stream. You're on the air with our good friend, Colonel Physician Josh Blackjack McConkey.
I don't know how they get the time period of 2 weeks that would take to build this nuclear weapon or something. How stupid do you think the American people are to buy this propaganda? And I'm not coming from the far left. I'm not at all. I supported Trump in a way, but it seems ridiculous. It seems absolutely ridiculous. And I'm sick to my stomach for the last few weeks, and I don't know how people are buying this.
Interesting perspective that Brian has. What say you on that, Colonel? I mean, we're not the Mossad. We don't know all the intel, and we don't know what the CIA knows, but take a stab at that. I mean, that's kind of interesting. 2 weeks, maybe it was 2 days. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess that's a comment on how close they may have been to having nuclear weapons. Is that
he said 2 weeks, and he thinks it's propaganda. Right there, you go. How do they know that? Is really what I was trying to say.
I can't talk about anything classified, of course, but of course I can assure you it was much closer than anyone would have liked, and I can tell you publicly that during those negotiations, so Wickoff, as they sat down with the Iranian regime, the designees for the Iranian regime walked into negotiations. They were trying to handle this diplomatically, and as nicely as possible. I'll kind of the foul language. I'll try to keep away here, but literally the Iranians walked in. They told Wickoff, "We have this many kilograms of weapons-grade material. We're going to make this many bombs. You can't stop us." They dropped that right at the beginning of negotiations. So they were not negotiating in good faith. They were dangerously close to having nuclear weapons. I can't confirm or deny the exact date there, but it was extremely scary, and this was clearly the action that needed to happen. There is nobody in the United States of America that, had they had that intel, not made the same decision, I can assure you.
Well, Brian in Valley Stream, I appreciate your call because you're onto something too. And I want to say this, Colonel, I don't know, this is a horror story. Let's imagine, and let's not imagine, but we'll just give this one. What if, from the conspiracy side of the world, if indeed we've wiped out their potential to develop a nuclear weapon, but what if something was smuggled in, still late in this game, that could be payloaded onto a missile, God forbid? We don't really know that, or do we know that? Who knows? The Mossad probably has better intel, the CIA, but that would be, as they've also said, something's coming. And they didn't just use those words, but let's hope and pray that our side catches it or, wipes it out before that horrible thing would even happen. That's, you think about that in the conspiracy world, that maybe another red nation. What if a rogue Russian nuclear weapon got traded off or they bought one? Who knows? As a backup. You never know, right?
Yeah, well, as the Soviet Union fell, that was some of the biggest concerns was the security over their nuclear weapon stockpile. So, those types of things can happen. That's something that we fight against every single day. That's the unseen war, the Cold War and the aftermath of the Cold War ending. It didn't really end, if people don't know, but it's just something that, we have good people in positions that track those things, and that's what keeps America safe. That's the CIA. And
I just wanted to mention, Colonel, one of the things we do talk about here is we give everybody, since the opening tagline is keep your eyes up into the skies and always watch the skies. For those of you, of course, that are interested in that part of our radio show, my suggestion to you is a brand new and updated Sky Report right there at the Dr. Sky Experience podcast on WABCRadio.com. And also late-breaking news that we talk about every week with owner and operator John Katzimatidis on the Cats Roundtable every Sunday morning. Privileged and honored to be behind this microphone. And a shout-out and thank you to the executive staff, to Chad Lopez, for giving me this opportunity to be with you this morning, ladies and gentlemen, coming up on 1 year with the Dr. Sky Experience. Let's move on. You've been patient. Max in Manhattan, good morning. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Doc. I would like to, it seems that what's not being said is that we have the Chinese and the Russians who are supplying the Iranians with arms. In addition, it seems that the Kurds in the northern Iran are being funded to come down and to be the grunts of this war, to have boots on the ground.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of players, right, Colonel, in this behind the scenes here. Who knows what's going to happen? But I don't know. My opinion, though it's not worth a lot, it's just they should shout it out there. Let's hope and pray to God we don't need boots on the ground in Iran. I don't think that would be an easy solution to the problem. But, Colonel, what say you from what Max is talking about? Lots of players involved behind the scenes here. Who knows when the next shoe will drop?
Yeah, that axis of evil, when you talk about China, Iran, and the Russians, that was flowing both ways. So, yes, the Russians were giving them some missile technology and munitions. Most of the drone technology that Russia has been using has been coming from Iran. And we've actually reverse engineered a lot of that. The Ukrainian battlefield has been a great test site. It's been a horrific war there, hundreds of thousands of lives lost, but we have learned a lot from those interactions. We've done some reverse technology on those Iranian drones. So, yeah, that was certainly flowing both ways. And then when you talk about the other behind the scenes, with the Kurds and, it's certainly a lot of activity, but, a lot of that is certainly classified, so I can't really confirm or deny any of that.
No, I appreciate it. I know you're not the spokesperson for the Department of War and certainly not trying to get that information out of you. Respectful to what you're doing with us here. But Max in Manhattan, if you're still with us, you can get the last word here because you brought up some interesting topics and subjects. Go ahead if you're with us.
Yes, thank you, Doc. Could it be that this is it's going to sound a little bit Hollywood-ish, but in the movie 300, we remember Leonidas climbs the side of a mountain before going to war, and he speaks to the Ephors, who decide that it's not a good idea for Leonidas to go at war because it's the time of the Carneia. It's easy to push aside someone, a bunch of old men in a mountain that are deciding when astronomically it's okay to go to war. But we do see things like that historically, so it's not just a Hollywood thing. What would you
you're right.
respond to that?
Colonel, go ahead, because I had something I wanted to add astronomically to that, but you got the floor here, and you're our guest.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I love that trivia there. So you're a big fan of the movie. But I wish I could say I knew it that well. But, everyone's got their different advisors. And, I think the president has a good team around him with, CIA and defense intelligence. And I think they're making some good decisions here. I'm telling you, if he didn't make that, we would be in a world of hurt very quickly.
Well, Max, I wanted to add something before we say thank you to you and appreciate your time with us on the Dr. Sky Experience. It's interesting. Many wars, I know the Colonel can corroborate this. Let's look at D-Day. It was done astronomically in the sense that they did this usually at the dark of the moon, when new moon. And what's amazing, Colonel, and everybody listening, this particular action that the Israelis and the Americans took, they knew that those people were in a meeting through all their intel. So they probably could have done this at night to sneak up, but with all the technology, what did they do? They did it when they had to, and this particular one was done in daytime. But many, many people out there always think that they do this during the dark of the moon, and that has been true for so many campaigns. You hit them when you can see no moonlight, because that moonlight, as many people know, when it's full, it lights up the sky, right, Colonel?
Yeah, absolutely. Flying that one mission under night vision goggles, it was a cloudy evening, and that certainly played into our planning and timing on that, hitting about 3 a.m. So absolutely critical.
Let's go to Stu in Brooklyn. You've been patient. You're on our radio show, and what say you? Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. One thing I wasn't going to bring this up, but as long as I have you and I'm talking to an Air Force colonel, I'm a veteran. Last time, just as an aside before we get to the main point, last time I was at the VA, I happened to have run into a gentleman who was 100 years old. He had been a navigator on a B-17 out of the UK and flew 27 missions over Germany. And the one thing he told me that stuck with me since that conversation, and what he said was, when we took off, we know that half of us were never coming back.
Exactly.
And no one ever said, I'm not going. I wonder if that kind of generation still exists. Anyhow, more to the point of the call, this idea that Trump is gambling, I think is nonsense. If he's gambling, he's got loaded dice in his pocket. You've had spooks on the ground over there, both ours and probably Israeli, preparing the groundwork. And all that's happening now is they're clearing the weeds away for whoever they have elected or have negotiated a deal with to take over after the ground has been properly cleared. That's how he would gamble. Guy's been a very successful businessman, and the kind of judgments he makes would not include gambling all of this technology, all of this effort on a possible comeback. It's
well said,
fixed.
Stu. No, well said. And I like the part about the B-17 because many of those pilots, as you, and not to be overly reiterate, it's so important. Many of them knew that they weren't going to come back, but they did it anyway because that was their duty to this country. Colonel, Stu brings up some very interesting points from history and his observations.
And again, that's part of that greatest generation. Just an incredible group of individuals. The fate of the world rested on their shoulders. And I do think that we have the men and women that could make that type of sacrifice now. I've served for 24 years. And what's very unique about our military right now is these are all volunteers. Nobody's drafted. We all knew exactly what we were getting into and why we were doing what we were doing. When I served in Iraq in 2007, I wanted to make sure that those men and women had the best medical care they could possibly have. I didn't have to be on that Chinook helicopter for that air assault, but I just knew that if something happened, I wanted someone that could be there for a chest tube or for an airway and to save that life, get that tourniquet on. Again, I was a big adrenaline junkie, and I bit off a lot more than I could chew right there. I tell you, it was pretty scary. But we still have the men and women that are committed to that. And if the fate of the world or that type of fate was falling upon America, I think we would still do that without any hesitation, I can assure you.
No, it's amazing. And as the motto goes, right, so all gave some, but some gave all. I mean, that sounds like a cliche, but no, in my heart, it's a very powerful statement. And to all the military members, men and women, you know, it's amazing. This is a voluntary military nowadays. It's not a draft. So look at all the young people, men and women, that want to work on behalf of American exceptionalism. And that's our big shout out to all those and those that have perished. May their memory live on. How powerful, right, Colonel? This is powerful stuff.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
No, absolutely. I mean, I served a short time in the Army. My time is not anywhere near as important, but everybody did something, and we're all out there to do this. And I understand. Tell me if you know some of the recruiting stats. I'm understood that none of the branches of the service are, quote, short on the list. It seems like they're well up there. So a lot of young people are going into the military. It's not that we have like a drought. Am I correct in that assessment?
That is correct. All services. Basically, you've seen that pivot back to mission focus, that focus on lethality and just doing the job. Certainly the previous administration had some focuses on some other things. There's a great book by General Mattis, Secretary Mattis, Call Sign Chaos. And he didn't want to get too political in that book, but he just did make the comment that, listen, the U.S. military holds itself to a higher standard. It is not the place for cultural experimentation. It is about delivering lethality. It's a terrible mission when called upon. When you have to take a life or you see people being killed, You can't be focused on other things. It has to be that singular mission focus. And we're back there now. And men and women are proud to be a part of that. And that's why you've seen the recruiting numbers just explode, since basically November of 2024. And, people are proud to be a part of that, be part of something bigger than themselves. And when you put on that uniform, you are a hero, and you're just part of something bigger.
Amen.
I have served
Amen,
for 24
brother.
years.
Absolutely. Whether you're in the Army, as many of my Army friends, Rangers lead the way, they say, but every branch has its special phrase, and they're all so important. And again, not to be overly repetitive, again, your numbers that you're talking about here, it's not like we're begging people to go into the military to force a draft. These young men and women are doing this, and look at the great sacrifice that they're making as a volunteer. So that's an important part. And talking about that, Colonel, I think it's so important for people to take a look. And I'm not on a pulpit when I say this. You say it better in your book. Volunteer. There's so many things out there that people can do. Get some training when it comes to learning how to save yourself. We're going to get into that more with you, Colonel, on maybe some go bags and what people need in a medical kit that they should have all around themselves. What happens if your child has an accident, you yourself go into some sort of a problem situation? Be prepared, right? But the volunteer thing is what I consider to be so important here. And let us never lose that ability to remember that so many people out there need help and they need a friend. So there's a good way to go, right? Volunteer.
Absolutely. Everyone has a different set of gifts. Everyone has a different set of skills, and America needs you. Get out there and coach a little league, volunteer in a church or school, or maybe you don't like working with people. That's great. Go to that local animal shelter, and those animals can be emotional support animals for somebody. So everyone has an important, skill that they can help with, and America needs you. Life is a team sport.
Amen, brother. It's a good thing. And when we come back after this bottom of the hour break, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into more with the good colonel and the good doctor on how we can put together these different go bags and certain things I'll ask you because, in those medical kits, I have some specifics that I'd like to ask you as a medical doctor that they might need to have, and some food and storage in the event of anything to happen. Look at the disasters that can happen, whether we're having people listen to us on the West Coast or anywhere where earthquakes or tsunamis could happen. Just need to be prepared, not to overly beat it up, but it's so important. In about a minute and a half, how do people get your book? I was holding off until now to tell people how they can go get Be the Weight Behind the Spear. And how can they get the book, Colonel?
We've got the paperback, we've got the ebook, and the audiobook. You can find it on Amazon. It's also at Barnes & Noble, and really anywhere you can buy audiobooks. So if you can learn more at weightbehindthespear.com. And I've also got a nonprofit organization on that website as well that you can learn more how you can contribute in your own community. So thank you very much.
Always a pleasure here to have great guests like yourself. If we haven't gotten to Tony in Clifton, Gary in Michigan, Harriet in Brooklyn, and you, ladies and gentlemen, still don't be shy. Still time if you'd like to join in the dialogue on this very interesting edition of the Dr. Sky Experience, as I like to say, and hopefully you agree. We call it Theater of the Mind. You can be on stage with us at the microphone at 1-800-848-9222. We will be right back.
Coming up at 5 a.m. on the 77 WABC News Hour, Weekend Edition.
I'm Jake Novak. Hey, New Yorkers. Do you care about the environment? Do you care enough about it to pay another $1.90 a gallon at the pump every single time? I didn't think so. We're talking the news and the top car and truck stories for New York and everywhere, starting at 5 a.m.
The 77 WABC News Hour, Weekend Edition.
Weekend mornings at 5.
77 WABC.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, this is Dan Warwick, and what the world needs now is love, sweet love. And you're listening to the Dr. Sky Show.
Where liberty dwells, there is my country. A quote from Benjamin Franklin a long time ago, and his words continue to live in infamy. 31 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, how time flies in this cosmic world as we talk about the space-time continuum. We continue now with our special callers and our special guest. Let's continue to say good morning to Tony in Clifton. You've been patient. Good morning, Tony. How you doing?
Hi, Dr. Sky. How are you? Thank you for taking my call.
Hey, pleasure. Thank you.
So one of the things I'm just sort of jumping in on the show, so I'm not really sure where the whole direction of it's going. But here's my thought. I've been looking at in this Iran war. I've been looking at two topics, which is the Strait of Hormuz, and I'm also looking at the Suez Canal, which is President Trump says U.S. ships should be allowed to travel there. And one thing I've noticed just today is that Egypt is one of the countries that, and these are just two places where trade is affected, because really what President Trump wants to do is just take us out of war and bring us to a more even economy worldwide where people can.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I've noticed in Egypt that they haven't, they don't have any bases. So, because no one's like Iran has attacked everybody, and that's what we're all talking about. But they haven't attacked Egypt because Egypt doesn't have a U.S. port. We don't have any port there. Not surprising. So I thought that's tonight for some reason what I was thinking about. There's so much to think about, and I think one of the things that's so amazing is that there are different sort of groups that manage sort of stabilizing the world and all these other things. And they say, nonprofit organizations. And they were saying that, I don't remember which group it was, that Egypt should really, that's one country that could do more to help here, because they're kind of standing with Iran. Iran is thinking about its Strait of Hormuz. Is that how you say it? And
Strait of Hormuz. Well, you have it pretty much correct. But, Tony, this is fascinating. In the limited time we have, I don't want to mean to cut you off, as we're doing here, sorry. But I wanted the Colonel to jump in because the whole area is a flashpoint. And I go to his direction on this better than myself. That's why we have great guests. So I appreciate you, Tony.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the lack of attacks on Egypt have a lot more to do with just the tyranny of distance. So to do that, Iran would have to fire missiles across Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Israel itself, really, to get anywhere in Egypt. I certainly wouldn't put it past the Iranians, just because they seem to be firing rather indiscriminately, but it's really not as easy of a target for them to reach for the most part, just strategically.
Yes. Once you take out their missiles, obviously they're pretty much neutralized, unless there was a ground war, and I think that's pretty obvious to so many people. And I think that's what the President and the Department of War and the Israeli military are pounding them as we speak, even with the incredible B-52s. For those that are in the Vietnam era, remember the amazing carpet bombing with the B-52s, as described by many of the locals. I'm sure, Colonel, you've read this many times. Some of the people in the North Vietnamese military, they literally could not believe, almost their eardrums were shattered, when these particular Operation Linebacker B-52s did carpet bombing. And I think that's what's going on over there as we speak, don't you think?
Yeah, and, it's these legacy bomber platforms. I've done some air refueling and seen them up close, just very majestic aircraft. I'm a huge military historian as well, and, I've just probably every book, every movie on the Vietnam War. I was born in the 70s, so I was raised on Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, Apocalypse Now, and that Operation Linebacker was just a huge campaign. It didn't really yield the results that they wanted it to, but boy, it sure unleashed a lot of destruction.
Well, Colonel, I don't mean to take away from the callers, but one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had, and I know in your book you have a dedication to an individual who was a boomer on a KC-135 known as Kiwi, and I can tell you from my quick experience, lying there next to the boomer, we went up many times with the Arizona Air National Guard. What an experience lying in the back watching what was coming up to get that thirsty drink that some of those F-16s and F-15s needed. That was wild. That was an experience. But talk about the legacy of Kiwi, this individual, a staff sergeant. It's a very interesting and sad story, but it also goes to perseverance in spite of, all trauma and problems. Talk about him for a minute. I think that's amazing.
Absolutely. When you talk about decisions, so Kiwan Amy, just an amazing airman, someone I had flown with on several missions in the Air Force Reserves. And Kiwi was put in a situation coming back from a drill weekend where he was driving back to Durham, North Carolina on a motorcycle, and someone pulled out right in front of him. And he had to make a split-second decision to either veer off to the left into oncoming traffic and hit someone head-on, or to just maintain course and just hit the vehicle right in front of him. And he was severely injured. It left him blind. Multiple bone fractures, liver injuries. And, watching him, persevere through that. And he has a fantastic book out called, Why Me? And it really is just a book about not being that victim, not playing that victim card. He had to basically learn how to walk again. He had to learn Braille because he can no longer see. And he now does a lot of public speaking.
Amazing.
And is very active on social media. And I've been following him. He's just an amazing individual. And just, sometimes in life you have to choose between the lesser of two just horrific, terrible decisions that independently you would never choose to make either of those decisions. But sometimes you just find yourself in a situation and you just have to make that split-second decision. And, there's terrible outcomes, but, he's really persevered, and it's very impressive. His resiliency is just a model for people.
Well, you say it so well, and again, a tribute. It's Kiwan, is that correct? I said it wrong.
Yeah, Kiwan, Amy, and we called him Kiwi. His nickname was Kiwi. That was his call sign.
But I think this one says it loud, and this is not me making this up. The Latin phrase again, tribulantio ditat, which translates to what, Colonel? Troubles make us stronger. And that's a true example of that story itself. A very powerful story indeed. Let's continue on with the callers. We have Gary in Michigan. He's been patient. Gary, you're on WABC. Your questions and comments to our guest.
Gentlemen, this is one of the most awesome shows, and it should go to the Talk Radio Hall of Fame. And I know whenever Tony calls in, I could go get a cup of coffee. And you brought up Vietnam. I just want to stay there for a second before I get to Iran. Sure. The Christmas bombings of 1972, the B-52 bomber pilots and their crews were briefed before and were told not to bomb the Hanoi airport. The first B-52 bomber that got over the Hanoi airport, they blew at the Kingdom Come. And with Vietnam, they brought up guys getting Medal of Honors, and the gentleman who got it from the Korean War, Captain Williams, is awesome. But I'd just like to say something about a guy who was in the Air Cav. He was a great pilot, helicopter pilot. He did some extraordinary things in Vietnam. His name was Alan Ace Calizio. And what he did one day with that helicopter to save a unit of American boys, he wasn't given the Medal of Honor for that, but they're looking at it, and I just want to tell people, everyone should urge that this man gets the Medal of Honor. He died maybe 20 years ago, but he deserves it, what he did.
Wow,
if you read about what he did, he deserved it. All right, with Iran. Okay, the Iranians, we know what they did with the embassy in 1979. In 1983, they murdered our Marines and Navy and Army guys in their sleep, and the French paratroopers who were on the other side of that runway were getting up to help the Americans, and they were blown up and murdered too. But the thing is, to me, they're like a bunch of cockroaches, and we dealt with this for 50 years. At least the guys who were there in 83, they're getting some satisfaction, the ones who obviously survived and their families, about what's taking out this leadership, because that freak Khomeini, he's not the original Khomeini when we were kids, but he's the second one, I believe. And
you're right.
What they got
he's the second
deserved
one.
that day. But here's what I want to warn people and caution people. We usually go to war with countries. It's not a war. This is just to me, this is an operation to get rid of these animals. But the thing is, Iran has 90 million people. We're not taking in millions of Iranians into America. Those days are long over. Don't fall, especially as long as don't fall that Iranians or Republicans are going to vote. But this is all nonsense. People come in here and they vote for their own interest, and that's what they do. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, people came here from this country, communist and dictatorships.
Yes,
oh,
Gary.
they don't want to live under it. But let me finish. Yeah, they don't want to live on it, but they'll have no trouble having you live under communists like the mayor in New York City, Mommy Commie.
Gary, you're full of a lot of good information here on this radio show, and I couldn't agree more on many of the things you talk about. Colonel, your response, and Gary in Michigan, thanks for being part of the show and giving us a nice compliment.
Yeah, no, your comments on the individual that flew medevac, that's something, that I have done personally. It's the thing that I am most proud of. I logged roughly 90 hours of combat medevac in the one air assault. And on my military challenge coin, I have one. I pulled one out that I'm looking on here, and I have my combat patch from Iraq on there. It's the 2nd 135th Combat General Support Aviation Battalion. I was the Charlie Company, and that motto for medevac, when I have, you're wounded, that's just homage to that lineage of some of the things that you were talking about. And boy, it's some amazing individuals. I've been very proud to be a part of that, and thank you for those comments. We appreciate it.
Well, Gary, thank you for your comments, and particularly about our show. We hope that you'll be part of future Dr. Sky show iterations. If we haven't gotten to you, like Harry in Brooklyn, anybody else who'd like to get in the conversation, still some time. We'll do our very best to get you on air with your comments and questions, and, of course, trying to keep them as brief as possible with time at 1-800-848-9222. We got a short few minutes before the next break, but here, I just wanted to entice the conversation with you. The necessity for go bags. I mean, God forbid a disaster happens. How prepared are people? A simple backpack with maybe some dry food, flashlight, anything you need to protect yourself that's legal in your area. But the medical kit, I want to talk about this and just see if we can do this for the short time we have. An antidote to fentanyl. I'm hearing more and more about this, that people are getting something which is an antidote. What is the antidote in case, God forbid, you're involved in a fentanyl attack?
Yeah, and you see that, and they're very good about getting that out in the communities now. So when you talk about these go bags, having some very simple things like tourniquets and bandages, specifically some of with a quick clot, there's some combat bandages that really help with the bleeding. And then with those types of overdoses, the Narcan. And, you can give it nasally. There's some that come as injectables, but that's the reversal agent for opiates and fentanyl specifically. I unfortunately see a lot of opiate and fentanyl overdoses. And, boy, over the last couple of years, at the height, there was about 120,000 Americans dying a day just from fentanyl overdoses alone. So
right, and wrongly, you were described as the naproxen Nazi. That's not fair to you, but you were doing everything you can to wean people off of opioids, right?
Yeah, I take great pride in that. So that's because I was not prescribing opiates. I would only prescribe the non-steroidal medications like naproxen. Yep. So that's why they called me the naproxen Nazi. So it was a badge of honor for me.
So I read a good part of the book there, right, Doctor? There you go.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll be right back on the Dr. Sky Experience, 1-800-848-9222, as we take the show to the top of hour number 2. And stay tuned after me, Dr. Sky and the Dr. Sky Experience, for Walter Serling, for another Side of Midnight. We will be right back.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
This is Julie Rogers-Familia, granddaughter of Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, and you're listening to the Dr. Sky Experience on Talk Radio 77 WABC.
So many to so few. The words of the immortal Winston Churchill as we move to the top of hour number 2, 46 minutes after the hour. I'd like to continue, Colonel, with the idea of individuals out there. And we're not selling this. We're not promoting any specific product or company here. But the necessity for these go bags. I travel around the state of Arizona and to other parts of the West, which are pretty rural. And I've made it a commitment after time in law enforcement and military to do the right thing. And what's that? Just be prepared, whatever you need. So describe more on the medical side of the equation, your area of definite expertise. You were describing blood clotting stuff, the blood powder, I guess, that stops some of the bleeding, tourniquet. But then again, people need to get education. You can hurt yourself if you don't know how to use a tourniquet. Is that correct?
Yes. And so you can, I have a very, obviously, I'm looking at it in the corner here, so I actually have a big trauma kind of go bag. And I mean, I could even do chest tubes, airway. You're not going to have that type of training. So just start very simply. If you, stopthebleed.org, stopthebleed.org is a great organization set up by the American College of Surgeons that really gives some basic training for just lay people. If you don't have any medical background, you're not a paramedic, you're not a nurse or a physician, you can get some great training on how you can save lives. And it was started by a surgeon by the name of Dr. Jacobs. I actually met him on the Defense Health Board when I gave a talk about the critical care air transport course, and just a wonderful group of individuals, and you can save lives. Just start with that training.
No, I don't want to step out of my boundaries. I'm not a medical doctor by any means. That's where we have people like you. But let's talk about another device. I hope I pronounce it right. The AED, that's like the heart unit. I see them in all locations. People see them. People look up, like at airports. But let me ask you, this is not like being an attorney here. Neither of us are. I mean, are there training courses for civilians on those? And could you use one? I gather you could if somebody's having a heart attack. Do people offer training? And describe what the unit is, so in case people don't know.
Yeah, so that AED, it's an automated external defibrillator. So for people that watch those medical shows, somebody's having a heart attack, or they have a very dangerous heart rhythm, or their heart stops, right? They put those pacer pads, and it gets all dramatic, hey, clear, and then they shoot the electricity through there. This is what that looks like in real life. So you put those pads on the chest. The best way to learn how to do that, because it's all automated, so you don't have to interpret anything. The computer will all do that for you. Just go to just a basic life support, just a BLS class, those CPR courses, American Heart Association, every community, every hospital system, so many community organizations. Just go to the AmericanHeartAssociation.com, and you can actually find a course and just learn some basic life support things, and it will teach you how to use an AED.
Right, and these personal go bags that people carry, I mean, I don't get into the litigation of, if you're out there and you see an accident, I don't know what the liability thing is if you're going to use one of those mouth-to-mouth devices, that can, give a person, if you're doing CPR or mouth-to-mouth on there, you want to be careful too. But the point is, there probably are some limitations on what you can do. But does that also apply to a Citizens Act? Does that protect anybody if they're out there just working on people at random who need help? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's part of the Good Samaritan Act. Okay. Nobody is going to just sit there and watch somebody bleed to death, right?
No, of course not. I would not.
Yeah. I mean, get involved. Those fear of lawsuits, that doesn't really happen. And even if there were to be something, there's Good Samaritan statutes that protect you as long as you're not trying to do something crazy like drill into someone's skull or do a chest tube out in the middle of the field and you don't have a medical license, those types of
Don't
things.
Pretend you're a surgeon when you're certainly not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If you're doing airway things, helping someone breathe, bag valve mask, mouth to mouth, chest compressions, or putting on a tourniquet and stopping bleeding, those things save lives, and you're doing the right thing. You're covered by the Good Samaritan laws.
Any other items for this go bag for emergencies that you would consider from the medical side with your expertise? What would you tell us? Anything else?
Just so simple things like people when they die from trauma, they die from blood loss, they die from coagulation disorders and hypothermia. So just even blankets. They have some of those space blankets and emergency blankets. So you're keeping them warm, helps prevent some shock. Unless you have like a paramedic background, just to put in like IVs or fluids or those types of things. If you just keep it very simple, tourniquets, bandages, stop the bleeding, help them breathe, chest compressions if you need to. And, the AED devices are pretty much ubiquitous in airports and malls and community centers, at the gym. Just having a basic life support class to learn how to use that. I mean, you can save a life.
And the Red Cross, I understand, around the nation, of course, and maybe even around the world, they offer these kind of programs, and people can go to community colleges. There's so many opportunities, right, Doctor, for people to get in the training mode so that they don't become a victim of circumstance, which is the big thing that we're talking about here. Ending off our radio show, we say always thank you to our special guest. Again, tell us how people can get in touch with you. And again, how can they get a copy of Be the Weight Behind the Spear?
So you can follow at weightbehindthespear.com, WEIGHT, weightbehindthespear.com. On social media, on Instagram, it's Josh McConkey, MD. And then X is McConkey 007. I'm a big James Bond fan. And I've actually got a children's book series out now that if you go to lovelittleleaders.com, you can, teaching leadership skills for the next generation. So we got a lot of projects going.
And you also, had a run for Congress in the North Carolina's 13th Congressional District. Is that also true? I think I read that somewhere.
I did. I ran for the 13th District. I was outspent by $12 million.
Wow.
Learned a ton. And I'm now running for lieutenant governor right here in North Carolina.
Wow. Now that's a revelation on the Dr. Sky Experience. I didn't really know that. That's great news, breaking news of our own. And we wish you the greatest of success right now. Talk about that, the campaign. When is Election Day? Obviously this November, or are we talking about a year from now? Tell us.
Yeah, so this race is in 2028, and we're bringing purpose-driven leadership back to Raleigh. We need some just more conservative leadership. With my time as a emergency physician, as a military commander, as a Duke professor, I was a prior Duke professor. And, with our book and nonprofit organization, we're just trying to build up the leadership skills and the next generation of North Carolinians and Americans. And we're going to do that here in North Carolina and take back the lieutenant governor office.
Well, good luck to you, Doctor. You got my vote, and I'm sure many people listening, of course, believing in American exceptionalism and the things that you're talking about saving lives. We wish you the greatest of success in acquiring the lieutenant governorship of the great Tar Heel State, North Carolina, one of my favorite states. I was in the business of the body armor world many, many years ago, in the law enforcement world, and we went and landed, of course, in the Raleigh-Durham area, in the Research Triangle Park. But then one of my favorite locations was going out into Asheville. What a beautiful town, and I know they suffered tremendously. Hopefully they're rebuilding from the torrential hurricanes and storms they've had.
Yeah, and that was the whole purpose of our nonprofit organization, the Weight Behind the Spear Foundation. We got involved with Edward Graham and Samaritan's Purse to help rebuild out there in western North Carolina. There was a lot of devastation. But if you've got friends and family in North Carolina and want to learn how you can help, go to StrongerNC.com, and we'd love to have you join the team.
Absolutely. Well, Doctor, and Colonel, we've spoken about so many things: family values, integrity, leadership, accountability. And wouldn't it be wonderful if the entire political world followed these rules? I know you're Aussies running for lieutenant governorship there of North Carolina. Obviously, you've got it. You've got it pretty much down. But the last thing I want to say, and then we give our special guest the floor, obviously the statement of the hours: America is the last true bastion of freedom in the world. Your comments, of course, on that topic.
It is. Certainly you saw during COVID, you saw what happened in Canada. And actually, I was in Australia. They locked down people in apartment complexes for 111 days. You saw what they did with the truckers that were just doing peaceful protests there in Canada. And they shut off access to their bank accounts, starved them out, and actually some of them lost their mortgages. But America is the last bastion of freedom. And, Americans need to realize that what they do matters every single day. So get out there and volunteer and be a part of your community, because life is a team sport and we need you.
I wasn't going to do this if time, didn't permit, but here's a shout out that I would like to give. Maybe you know this organization. They're former operators and people in the intelligence community, and many people are saying they cannot get their relatives or loved ones out of this region of the war zone in various locations. I don't know if you're familiar with the organization. I've done research. It's called Gray Bull Rescue. I think it's .org, and forgive me for not knowing if it's .com. But Gray Bull Rescue, I think they're doing some amazing things. So if family members are trapped, they have the ability to go behind the scenes. I don't know if you're familiar with them at all, but I thought I'd mention that for anybody who's suffering with that loss or where these people are and they can't get them home. What say you?
Yeah, I did. I just looked that up while we were chatting. It's graybullrescue.org.
Okay.
Boy, I'll have to read through that. It looks like a wonderful organization.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much for appearing here on the Dr. Sky Experience. I hope we can do this again with your permission, and keep us abreast of your campaign, the best of success in acquiring that position. There's not many states. Well, Arizona is looking to have a lieutenant governorship here. We've always had a secretary of state as that individual, but wow, all the things you're talking about here, we of course go back to the main theme: truth, justice, and the American way, and American exceptionalism. Thank you so much, Colonel. Thank you so much, Doctor. 2 men in one, and we've been honored with his presence here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Hopefully we'll talk soon, and the best to you and your family, and of course in your campaign.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Always great to have you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that pretty much wraps up hour number 2. And again, a little bit of a diversion as we continue to talk about the themes of what's up in the heavens. We find out that spring is just around the corner, seriously on the astronomical side, on March the 20th, hopefully warming up the world. Daylight saving time is just about to happen for many of you in the Eastern time zone very quickly. And when 2 a.m. strikes on Sunday, you know daylight saving time will be in effect. Something that's been around, ladies and gentlemen, for a long, long time, a very controversial subject. Some people like it, some people don't. But the truth of the matter is, it's been something. 34% of the world's nations use daylight saving time. Not to be overly repetitive, places around the world and around the nation, more specifically Hawaii and most of Arizona, except for the Navajo Nation, do not observe daylight saving time. The great Benjamin Franklin proposed this concept in France to many attentive listeners back in 1784, and New Zealand entomologist and astronomer George Hudson, he proposed using daylight saving time in 1895, and Europe and Canada were one of the first to actually take it on as we move your clock ahead 1 hour through time and space. All the best to you, ladies and gentlemen. Health, happiness, clear skies. We'll be doing it again in about a week. The Dr. Sky Experience. Check us out with our podcast at WABCRadio.com. And by the way, listen to all the other great podcasts of all the other people you hear on this powerhouse radio station.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our country has to offer, especially health care. Across every state, every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.